Did I just cough up a dystopian society? Hey neighbor, welcome back to ARTV and another episode of Rock Gone Wrong. Today we're looking at the 9th studio album by the English rock band Muse, consisting of Chris Wolstenholme, Matthew Bellamy, and Dominic Howard. Now hang with me on this one because I know you've seen the title of this, but rest assured that not all episodes of this series are created equal. I have very conflicted feelings, and we'll get into it now. For the first time since Absolution released in 2003, Muse have officially broken their 3-year routine that they typically do. We had 03, 06, 09, 12, 15, 18, and 2022. A lot of this album was created in isolation, or else band members creating their parts separately as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the themes of the album definitely represent that. The guys are promoting their 9th album, Will of the People, as kind of a greatest hit snapshot meant to represent everything that Muse have done well, or else that people have enjoyed from them in their past up to this point. They were approached with the idea of making a greatest hits album for their label, but instead they just decided to do it all in one place. And while in theory that's definitely something that the fans were excited over, I found myself a little bit hesitant after a certain electronic-leaning album that had simulation at the front of its title. I grew up listening to and idolizing Muse's discography, which is why it's been disheartening to see them kind of lose their way and play into a lot of the cheesy tropes that they've definitely been parodied for in the past. As much as I wanted this album to be a full-on Glory Days return to form, it's unfortunately falling way short of that. And while this album does have some things going for it, and we'll get into the positives too, I would say that the one common factor is futuristic cringe. Muse continue to ham it up with these insipid recreations that feel almost like Frankenstein monsters of their past works, as they give us the smoke show, but they don't necessarily actually step out of the smoke to give us their full potential. It's interesting that they chose to self-produce this album, and I can understand why they did that, but I do think it becomes a bit detrimental when they continue to condense and smoosh the production altogether so that you kind of get a brick-walled sound on some of the best tracks, even like Kill or Be Killed. You see, the most jolting thing here is that they're actually delivering musically what the fans want to hear, but I fear that a lot of people are just going to see that at surface level and take it as a full-on return. Muse are back, baby! Realistically, it's much lazier and more self-indulgent than I think any of us would really want to admit. It lays it all out there, but the blueprint somehow got foiled in the process. Simply retooling the past is not enough to make an entire album stand in a league of its own. It's an album that tries to recreate some of the things that they do well, and there is a spark that kind of semi-updates their sound, but it also, in the same breath, feels like they're saying the same exact thing about society and changes and the government and everything that they've been doing really forever at this point, and they're not finding a way to make it feel new. The political messaging is inconsistent, and that definitely gets tedious after a while, and that's nothing really new to Muse. It's just that the more they stack onto their discography, it feels like another building block that I'm having a harder time stepping up onto. For a band that once made forward-thinking space odysseys has spiraled into generic doomsday pandering, and the fact that they're bringing back some of the musicality that we really enjoy isn't enough to erase the flaws written in blood. It is really tough because there's a lot that I really latch on to musically, and that's all well and good, but it's so much of a nothing burger. You bite down expecting something juicy, but instead you just get the buns and you're like, oh wow, that's a lot of bread. I guess this is what I wanted. I was hopeful for more prominent bass with some awesome bass lines from Chris after seeing some of their live shows and remembering the fact that they do it so well, and Chris is very inventive when he wants to be, but I just don't find the rhythm section of this record to be engaging the majority of the time. Will of the People gives us just enough of a spark of hope to keep holding on for whatever they might deliver in the future. And I'm not saying that it's not worth exploring and hoping, thinking that they might make some sort of comeback, because the talent is packed in there. We see a lot of the potential, but they're failing to capitalize on it by regurgitating the past. And I feel like this album is going to have a relatively low replay value because it's already been that way with the singles. As much as I might have enjoyed Kill or Be Killed or the lead single Won't Stand Down, I didn't find myself coming back to them a ton, and I just can't force that. Let's open with the initial trio of singles, Won't Stand Down, Compliance, and the title track, Will of the People. We started off strong enough with a metalcore adjacent song, complete with a breakdown and some intense screams. I don't love the production on this song, and I do think that it goes over a lot better live, which most of their material actually does, but it's really evident on this album more so than others. Compliance, however, is like rubbing a cheese grater against your eardrum. It's just shrieking with these synths that don't go anywhere, they just hit a wall and continue to drop these parallels between society and the future, and we're being controlled, and I just can't stand it. That title track didn't make the jagged little pill fall down any smoother because it arguably got even worse with silly, obnoxious lyrics, and sure, a fun enough, spry instrumental that definitely harkened back to the 70s and 80s era of rock music. But it didn't really do much for me because of, one, the obvious comparison to The Beautiful People by Marilyn Manson, but also just because of the fact that it feels like squawking in my ear. Kill or Be Killed soars in as a power blast to the skull, something that absolutely raises the bar, and it's exactly what we wanted from Muse, and they fucking knew it. It's certainly easier to forgive some of the song's minor flaws when you can focus on the footwork from Dom. He's doing incredible things as he drills it in behind the kit, and also the bass line worth salivating over. I can finally hear it mixed properly. Verona comes immediately after and is another one of my top favorites on this record, although it is again undermined by some of its writing that really makes it hard to fully accept. I dig the atmosphere, the way that the more electronic texture gives way to some of the more rock-influenced material. If you're looking for the side of the record that embraces the cheesiness a little bit more, then I would recommend a track that's been growing on me a decent amount, You Make Me Feel Like It's Halloween. The creaking, spooky synths add some spice, and I dig the guitars and the overall personality snark that's delivered from Matt Bellamy, but it somehow also feels a little bit emptier than a haunted house in January. The piano-led ballads Liberation and Ghosts, How Can I Move On certainly leave a lot to be desired. They feel a little bit haphazard in the way that they're delivered, especially Liberation, in the sense that it's a slow roar, but it never really builds to anything, as they're just repeating and circling the drain as they talk about, oh, but what if this happens in the future? How Can I Move On is nice enough in that it's dedicated to those that lost partners during the COVID-19 pandemic, but it doesn't really feel like it has any personality, anything unique to say whatsoever. Finally, we get to Euphoria, which is one of the most fun moments on this album. It's just unabashed in what it wants to be, it's insanely catchy, and while it's not without its flaws, it definitely delivers on what more of this album certainly should be. There's a slew of chirpy synths and sturdy-ass guitars that really keep things moving forward, and if there was more like Euphoria that I could actually sink my teeth into, then I think they would have been on a much better path. As we arrive at our finale, we are fucking fucked! I have to laugh out loud at the delivery of some of the lines on here. We are getting fucked! Everything here feels so goofy and bombastic and not really in a good way at all. It reads like a rampaging list of news headlines from the past few years, and they don't provide any detail. Like, for the love of God, could we get maybe your thoughts on a solution, or how we avoid things, or maybe just go into a little bit of detail of exactly what it is we're experiencing instead of just listing things? That's a huge pet peeve for me. The operatic-styled vocals at its conclusion almost feel like they're unintentionally spitting in the face of old Muse, and I find myself torn because in places it can be fun and you can find yourself drawn to the music, but I immediately start laughing again as soon as I think about the lyrics. Muse's ninth album, Will of the People, won't be the worst album you experience this year, but it's also far from the cream of the crop, and I think it falls into the disappointing side of the spectrum. It's something that's out there in forgettable pasture lands. It's an inconsequential release for the most part, And while it is a mixed bag that I would say is on par personally for me with Simulation Theory and the amount of enjoyment that I mine from it, I'm still gonna have to rate this a 2.5 out of 5. Will of the People by Muse. What did you guys think? This was another episode of Rock Gone Wrong, all just my opinion and take. I would love to hear your thoughts. Was it kind of like swallowing an apple with razor blades inside and you cough out a dystopian society? Or were you feeling really positive and rejuvenated by the energy? Any and all thoughts are welcome. Hit that like button, subscribe for the love of music. More of my Muse content is on screen now, and I'll be back soon with more on ARTV.